I need some traction.
Hey folks, Lloyd Lobo here, co-founder and co-host of Traction. On today's episode, we have Mark, founder and GP at MXV Capital and founder CEO of Gynger. He's going to share top tips for disrupting the cloud industry with innovation, leveraging his experience as an 8-time founder who recently built Braze from ideation to 8 billion IPO in November 21. We're going to learn all about how to embrace the underdog mentality, navigate the contradictions with a culture of innovation, and understand the key principles for success. As an angel investor, prior to starting his companies, Mark was an early investor in companies like Nutanix, Lattice, Thoughtspot, Rubrik, Riskified, along with 50 other investments, largely focused on SaaS. So that's unicorn porn right there. Awesome. And now MXV is an up-and-coming early-stage fund building momentum for the next generation of cloud disruptors. Mark, welcome to Traction. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. That was quite the intro.
Awesome, man. It's rare to meet founders who've also had great success as an investor. So you've had a terrific journey, right? Entrepreneur, investor. Walk us through your backstory. How did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, I think for me, since I was a little kid, I just love starting stuff. I love solving problems, and naturally, I think just by being an entrepreneur, many just kind of gravitate towards tech because tech is endless imagination. And endless opportunities. And I think for me, I just kind of like when I was 13, I bought vending machines with my bar mitzvah money. And then in high school, I then started putting ads in bathrooms and selling the space. And then in university, I then started a cell phone business, selling prepaid phones to college students. And that was kind of the stepping stone that got me into tech. But again, I think I just naturally just love the concept of creating things, hiring people, building a team, building a culture, building a product, the challenge of raising capital, the challenge of selling the product into the market, figuring out product market fit. I really, really just love it. So that's kind of like how I got into this.
You crave the uncertainty, solving uncertain problems, right? Would you say you're a 0 to 1 guy or a 1 to 10 guy or 10 to 100 guy? I mean, you did take a company IPO. What's your first love?
So definitely a 0 to 1 guy, definitely a 1 to 10 guy. And like, obviously my co-founders at Braze were the ones that took it to the IPO. So I got it to a certain point. Bill, my co-founder, who was CTO at the time, who's the CEO now, he's just kicked ass and then took it to the IPO. So I guess you could say I'm 0 to 1, 1 to 10. But again, I think the 0 to 1 is what I personally enjoy the most. And that's kind of what I'm doing at MXV. Like everything that we're doing is pre-seed and seed. Like we get in really deep with every single one of our founders around product market fit, pricing, hiring, mental health, just the things that they're all going through and thinking about is where I love to come in. And typically I'm really good at just identifying the product market fit. Like, what are we actually building here? Who's actually going to be the power user? How do we sell into that? And how do we build some kind of way to our Trojan horse to get into the market? That's what I love trying to figure out.
Fantastic. What would you say was your big break? You've done 8 startups, but what was the one that you felt like, hey, this is the lottery ticket that paid for all the other struggles?
Yeah, I think it was obviously Braze, right? But I think everything was a stepping stone getting there. So like doing my vending machines just really helped me understand like the concept of margins and buying things and the costs and filling it and making sure we had inventory and all that stuff. And then separately building the restroom advertising business got me in the concept of selling. And I had to actually go sell the concept to stadiums, NHL stadiums, into gyms. So that was kind of what got me there. And then I would say the MVNO that I did, XE Mobile, really got me into the mobile industry. So it opened up my eyes to like, holy cow, there's a whole world of stuff here. But then you take all that, and then I think Braze, which originally started as Appboy, it wasn't so easy at the beginning, but I think there was a lot of things that happened where the aha moment kicked in. But that was it. That was the company that kind of what tipped for me, and got me into this whole ecosystem of startups, VC, tech. Without Braze, I don't think I would be here today.
Fantastic. So let's dive a little bit into Braze. What made you start that company?
Yeah. So one, like I said earlier, I love solving problems. And when Steve Jobs announced the iPhone and was talking about apps, I quickly realized and saw that, you know what, everybody's going to be making apps. Me, you, brands, established brands, there's going to be startups. And I was in the concept of like, you know what, I don't know if I want to get in the world of making apps, but I want to get in the world of supporting the apps that are getting built and their businesses around them. So when I saw that, I wanted to build a platform that kind of connected and built a bridge between the developers of apps and the brands creating apps and the users of apps. That was kind of the thesis of Appboy and what Braze is today, was how do we kind of build that bridge? I didn't know what that bridge was. I didn't know what material we were going to use to build that bridge, if you want to think about it like that. But I knew I wanted to build a bridge, and we went in, and I just saw like, okay, let's kind of figure out like how we connect them. What does it mean to connect them? What's an SDK? Like, how do we get inside the apps? What data can we track? What data is relevant to the brand? How do they now message these customers? Is it push? And I would start each time I kind of peeled the onion, I was like, oh my gosh, there's something here. The interesting thing was when we started, we were so early, like no developer or brand was even thinking about retention, right? They are all thinking about, I'm building an app, so I need tools that help me build my app. And then I need tools that help me acquire customers. And then I want the analytics. I want to know how they're using my app. But no one was really actually thinking about the next step around, okay, I just built this app. I spent hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars to build the app. I'm now going out there acquiring customers, spending X amount to acquire the customers. How do I now keep these customers retained, which was, to me, was the last step of the cycle that no one was thinking about. So there was a couple of years where we were just not getting one customer. But during that time, me and the team, we just kept our heads down and said, you know, we're going to build the best in class CRM, lifecycle marketing platform for mobile. And as soon as the market kind of shifted to like, wow, we need retention. Retention is a key KPI for us. Then this market started searching for platforms like Braze. And that's where I would say it kind of kicked in.
I think a lot of these apps realize, right? Even I did this company called Speakeasy. It was a calling app for salespeople. We got 10,000 people. Eventually, the company shut down because there wasn't retention. If you don't have engagement, you're not going to have retention. And if you don't have retention, you can't keep investing in growth. But like I think early days apps, they were constantly running ads and feeding top of the funnel growth and signups and downloads. But they didn't have that engagement and retention. A lot of these failed. So you provided a great service. Through all of that noise and waiting period, how did you get your first customers? How did you land on those?
The first customer was hard, and I remember it was Text Plus, and we were on them for, I would say, a good almost year to close. But I think what we wanted was we were looking for customers that are always interested in the latest technology and are willing to test things, right? So I think a lot of times startups are looking for the big brand names or someone that come in, but typically those big brand names kind of follow the trends, the trendsetters. And the trendsetters are usually the ones that are willing to try new technology. So you have to find who those buyers are. I think a lot of times we were wasting our time on the long tail and early startups. One, they didn't understand CRM. They didn't understand the concept of retention. They didn't have the budget for it. They didn't even have someone who was thinking about that. So one, we had to figure out like who is the ICP or the customer that understands CRM, has budget for it, has a whole bunch of users, and needs to communicate with them to retain them. So there was a lot of boxes that we needed to check off, and Text Plus checked all those boxes. But it was a lot. It was a lot of like building that relationship, and I would say 50% of it was based on trust and them trusting us and what we were building, and the remaining balance was based on just how awesome the product was, right, and how deep of an amazing product we built. Once we got them, they then turned into our sponsor and kind of recommendation for all our customers. So once we got them and we were able to show that we can scale, that we're actually retaining customers, we're seeing great conversion, we're actually able to deploy push messages and emails and then other brands started taking note. And I think that's what happened. And I think a special thing for us was, like I said, we went straight to the enterprise, and I would say mobile titans is what we called it at that time, instead of just kind of focusing on like the latest startup that got funding and going after them.
Because most startups who have funding usually have an engineering founder who thinks they can build it themselves. So that's a smart move, going enterprise.
Yeah, it was for them. It was like a lot of like, oh, why do we need you? We can just build this ourselves. Or two, they didn't really even appreciate the value proposition of what we were building. They're just, hey, like we're good with so and so. They provide us analytics, and that's all we need. Or we're good with so and so. They provide us attribution. That's all we need right now. But little did they know that, like, look, like you're spending all this money acquiring these customers. You need retention marketing. So eventually, all of those guys, the ones that survived and created actual real businesses out of their apps, as they matured as a company, then they're like, oh, wow, we actually need this platform.
Fantastic. I was just, I had Sarah Tavel on the show, and she talked a lot about this. She was early product manager at Pinterest, took them from 30,000 to 100 million. She's now a partner at Benchmark. And one of the things she said was, if you're growing users that are not completing the core action, then it's the empty calories of growth. Basically, the actions that your product wouldn't exist without, like YouTube is uploading content, for example. And then how do you create triggers to encourage people to come in the app to do those things? And it seemed like you were helping, Braze is helping people, apps exactly drive those engagements with those triggers.
Yeah, and it was also a big problem to solve, right? So before the introduction of mobile, you were only interacting with brands on your desktop or laptop, right? So it was very simple for a brand to track you. It was like, okay, you came to my website through the laptop or desktop, there's a cookie, and that's it. Like there was no concept of like continuing that customer journey on an app, on a native app, or mobile web, on your watch, on Apple TV, on your iPad. Like there was none of that around. So when we came in, we were actually solving a massive problem that was hard to solve. And then what also happened was, with the introduction of mobile, you also had new messaging come into play. So it used to be just email, but then you had push, then you had in-app messaging, then you had banners, you had notification centers inside apps. Like the whole thing changed very quickly. So the incumbents in the world weren't ready for it. And we came in and we were completely ready to hit go. So I think that was also a big factor for us in terms of like the infrastructure that we built and the ability to scale. And what mobile also did was it introduced the concept of being immediately global, right? Like Uber is a global brand, right? And it wasn't like, how do you manage retention marketing for a brand like Uber that has customers around the world on different time zones, different languages, different everything? And then how do you track all that and trigger messages based on when the customer wants to be notified, if it's push or email? So if you think about what I'm saying, like it's a lot of stuff in terms of like processing that data, doing it in real time on a global scale. So again, those
huge project, huge. And also, I think betting on a technology and going deep on it, that's going to enable the future, right? Like you guys bet on it very early. How did you know though? Like, I guess now it seems like, it's obvious, but when that first Apple phone came out, how did you know that I'm going to bet on this and this is going to be the future? How did you have that conviction?
So for me, what's interesting, and I think I had a unique view, was before I started Braze, I started an MVNO, so a mobile virtual network operator. And what that business was is we'd buy minutes at wholesale from the large carriers, and then we would rebrand it under our own brand. So the consumer thinks that we're a whole new cellular phone service. So that's what Virgin Mobile is, by the way. Virgin Mobile, what they do is they buy minutes at wholesale from Sprint. So any Virgin Mobile customer is actually using the Sprint network. When I was doing that, you saw Disney do the same thing. They came out with the Disney mobile phone. It was a Disney branded phone with exclusive content on this phone. Then you had ESPN launch as well. And ESPN launched the ESPN mobile phone with unique content on this phone. And you started seeing different brands start making this. None of them survived, including my MVNO. We actually had to sell off all the assets and we failed. But when I saw apps come out, I'm like, oh my gosh, like these are all the MVNOs that these companies were building. Now they just have to make an app that sits on the phone, and they create unique content and unique experiences within those. So everyone, in my mind, I was like, everyone's going to make these apps. So the Disney app is literally the Disney mobile phone. The ESPN app is the ESPN mobile phone. So I had this different perspective on it in terms of like, everyone's going to make apps. It's going to create a whole new world, and the customer journey is going to get very fragmented. And that was kind of the vision. Believe me, like we went raising money. People are like, oh, mobile marketing is too small of a market. There's no way this could be massive. And you know, I don't think anyone thought it would get as big as it is today. Like you have companies like Braze who are now doing over 400 million AR. You have Attentive, you have Postscript, you have Iterable, you have Salesforce Marketing Cloud, you have the Mobile Marketing Cloud. Each one of those are all anywhere from 50 million AR to a billion AR, and they're all in the same market. So it's a massive market, and you're still seeing, we didn't even talk about Klaviyo. We didn't talk about these other players, right? So there's all these players coming in. And again, it speaks to volumes of how massive mobile is, and kind of what Steve Jobs, I don't even know if he realized how big of a market he was creating when he introduced the iPhone.
But it takes a real visionary to see something new and go deep on it. Like you're basically seeing a future that doesn't exist, and you're starting to build it today. And you got all these naysayers and you're just ignoring it, and you're going. And that bet really paid off. So I'm curious, at what point did you think we found product market fit? Was there like some milestone you set in the early days, maybe go, no go, to drop it and work on another idea?
Yeah, I think for us, the aha moment was when we got customer feedback on a certain product. It was like the initial product was funny. We would have like this concept of a gamification inside the app. So we would gamify the experience for the user of the app and and get them to use the app more. They would get points. They would get all sorts of leadership boards. That was the initial product. And then based on that data, we would allow the brand to communicate to the customer. Many of the customers said, look, I love what you have here, but I don't want the gamification. Just show me who my customers are in a dashboard. Let me segment against their behavior, and then let me communicate with them. And that was the aha moment. I was like, oh my gosh, like this is CRM for apps. That's what we're going to build. And that was kind of like what happened for us. And when we hit product market fit, once we're showing brands that you could segment your customers in real time, and send personalized messaging at a unique time that the customer wants to be notified, across email, across push, across in-app messaging. That was like the product market fit that kind of hit the nail on the head.
Now, moving on from like Braze, success, you found product market fit, built a big company, you bet on the future and started building it today. You've invested in over 50 companies, right? IPOs, exits, unicorns. When you saw a company like Nutanix or Rubrik early on, what did you see that let you know that the market was going to be that big? It seems like you have a knack for finding these big markets that are building the future today.
I think the way I'll answer that is kind of what I look at for when I'm seeing a founder, right? I think like a lot of times founders may underestimate how large the market really is on both sides. So it could be that it's way too small, or it could be that it's much bigger than they anticipate. So when we're meeting a founder, we want to kind of understand, like, one, we want to look at the founder. Are they a founder that understands what it takes to iterate on the product? So a lot of times you and me will have this idea, right? So we have this idea that we want to go after. And the way we want to solve for that idea is the product that we want to build, which I kind of think about as the equation. So you have this thesis of the problem, then you have this product, which is the thesis. That thesis is still molding. Like we may chalk it up on a chalkboard, or we may put it on a whiteboard. But what I'm looking for is like founders that understand, okay, we all agree that there's a massive market, but we also have to understand that the product we have today may not be what it is tomorrow. But I'm looking for founders that understand that it can really adapt in real time to get there. Then I also think about, like, okay, is this a founder that people want to surround themselves around? Like, can they attract amazing talent, right? I think us as founders, we always have these great ideas, but eventually we're going to need those experienced executives and experienced team members to come and work with us. But a lot of those people want to be working for someone that they're inspired by, someone that they look up to, that they're just kind of always challenging them and that they're learning professionally. So one, I always think about, like, okay, can that founder do that? And then the second one is, like, can this founder grow into a new CEO as the company's growing, right? So will Iconic Growth, will Tiger, will all these growth funds invest in this founder when they get to that milestone? Is this someone that they want to invest in? So I look at all of that, and then we look at the product and the industry, and then we think about, like, how large is this market? Like, what does the tech stack look like? What do the budgets look like for the person that they're selling into? Is this market, is there room for this? Is this a must-have, or is it nice to have? Like, there's all this stuff that we're going through when we're doing this. And sometimes that can happen. You can know right away on the first call that this is it, or you need to take a couple of weeks and do some due diligence, which we do a lot of. So that's kind of like how I kind of frame it and how we think about what we do and how we invest.
This is awesome. Like, it's like trying to find this founder market fit. It's like, that's when passion turns into obsession and you can build something truly, truly big. Let's dive into Gynger. I mean, you have the fund, MXV.
Yeah.
And you've invested successfully. You've taken a company, helped take a company to IPO. What made you start Gynger?
Yeah. So Gynger was interesting. Again, I'm a problem solver. So I just saw when I was building the entire go-to-market team at Braze, and we were selling and so on, there was always like this divide between the customer and the vendor, where you were negotiating the terms, and then it was always about, like, payment terms. Like, well, I don't know what I want to pay. Do I pay up front? Can I pay monthly? And it was always like a weird conversation. So I wanted to build a platform that kind of like got rid of that. It was a way to think about, like, how do we change the way people, our companies, are buying the software and infrastructure they need and they love to run their business. And that was the concept. And how we do that is we built software that helps you manage your software infrastructure, but then we're starting to surround it with financial services. So in my mind, it was like a combination of software and fintech. We put it together, and it could unlock unimaginable opportunity for us, for the vendors, and for the buyers. And that's kind of how I think about it. And it's a massive market. There's $300+ billion being spent annually on software alone, and not even including AWS, Google Cloud, and infrastructure. So when I kind of look at, like, massive market, people are buying. If we can come in and solve and help with that buying journey on both sides of the spectrum for the vendors and the buyers, there's a unique opportunity here to be had. So that's kind of how I looked at it and how we built it.
And you have this very interesting background now. I mean, you're managing a sizable fund, early stage fund, very demanding of your time, right? Spending a lot of time with early stage entrepreneurs. They're probably that's when they need you the most. While building Gynger, what's it like? How do you balance?
No, man, it's the hardest question. Honestly, the way I answer that is my team. Like, I always say I'm trying to hire people that can help me scale, right? And like, thank God I have an amazing team at Gynger, with my CTO, my head of go-to-market, and the whole team there. On the MXV side, we have a full investment team from a principal to an associate to an analyst to my community manager. And then we just recently hired my chief of staff. And I look at it as one big job, right? I never come in and be like, today's my Gynger day and tomorrow's my MXV day. We're all in the office too. So I think that's a big thing for me. I'm a big office guy. So Monday to Thursday, we're all in the office. So we have MXV here, we have Gynger here. We actually have another company we incubated here that we haven't announced yet as well. So we're all in the office together, and it's just one big job. And honestly, I love it. So I don't feel like my time, I'm being stretched thin. It's just, I'm very passionate about it, but I also have like an amazing team on both sides that are just helping me scale and helping us execute. And we have amazing investors on both sides of it as well.
When passion meets profession, you become Michael Jackson. I was going to make a post on that. But
it's true. Like, I don't come in thinking like, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this today? It's like I'm doing. There's days where we're recruiting on the Gynger side. There's days where we're selling on the Gynger side, and there's days every month we have calls with every one of our founders. We have brainstorming sessions where we dive deep, and it's 2 minutes of an update, and then 48 minutes of like diving deep into product, diving deep into pricing, diving deep into what they're trying to accomplish this year, diving deep into like some of the mental health issues that they want to talk about. And it's so natural to me. So I really enjoy it. And we do that monthly. We have Slack channels with all our founders where it's very nonchalant and informal in terms of like communicating with them. If we have ideas, like we feel like co-founders with all our companies. And we like to think that we're being extremely helpful for them, right? So it's fun. It's fun. As long as it's fun and you enjoy it, you make it work. And then separately, you just have to have a kick-ass team to help you scale.
Definitely. A lot of people, and I've interviewed now hundreds of founders, right? Like Jeff Lawson at Twilio. He did 2 other companies before Twilio, and he's like, I just didn't love what I was doing, like StubHub, right? And he's like, I left, and then I found my passion in Twilio, and I played the long game, and it's like billion plus in revenue, still growing fast. And so I think there's a lot of truth there. Find something that's fun for you. Now, there's a lot of learnings to be had on the team side of things, because a lot of founders, what we do is we start off as being individual contributors, and then we keep being that IC. We don't know when to abstract to a manager and when to abstract to being a VP and being an executive. So how do you make that call? Like, who are the first few people you bring on? Because you mentioned team at least 5 times right now. Who are the first few people you bring on to help you scale?
Yeah. So one, from building a company, I think the biggest mistake lots of founders make is they hire too quickly at the beginning, right? So I think you want to be very slow to hire till you have product market fit. So on the company side, you want to bring in like strategic thinkers that can help you identify product market fit and are ready for the challenge, because it's super hard, and there's a lot of down days where you're just like hitting a wall, and you're feeling like you're not making progress. So for me, obviously, a CTO, head of go-to-market, someone that can help me talk to customers. You need a couple engineers that can help you kind of iterate on the product. So I think like a team of 5 is very important, between CEO, CTO, go-to-market, and engineers. And then within those 5, you should be able to figure out product market fit. And once you have that product market fit, then you start hiring on the engineering side to start building that product towards that. And then on the go-to-market side, the CEO and head of go-to-market are kind of taking it to market, talking to customers, getting those first few customers. And once you have enough pipeline, you're like, okay, now let's bring in that first AE that can help us kind of get out there and build more pipe and help us close more deals. And then naturally, as you're building more customers, you're also hiring more on product and on engineering, and then the 2 kind of grow in a nice way. But I think if you want to, I think like a team of 5 is the right kind of number for the early days in terms of figuring out the product market fit before you kind of press the gas on hiring. Because the last thing you want is you want a whole team of engineers. They're wasting their time building a product that doesn't even have product market fit. And then you're telling them, hey, all the stuff we just built, we don't need that anymore. Now we need to build something else because the market doesn't want that. Many engineers morally that can kill them. And I think like you need to find that unique group of 5 that understands like, okay, we're now trying to figure out product market fit, and the stuff and the iteration from the feedback we're getting from the market and from the street is how we need to apply this. And I think that's kind of how it works the beginning days. So it's like building that team and then expanding it once you have product market fit. On the fund side, it's a little different. For me, it's all about like deal flow. It's all about LP and founder experience and communicating with them. It's all about supporting our founders. So for me, it's a little bit of a different, because you're not really getting product market fit at a fund, but it's more about the operations and how we want to be structured as a fund to do this for the long term.
I think product market fit in a fund is if you're consistently getting good deal flow from awesome founders that meet that criteria you talked about, right? Like they're building the future today, they're in it for the long haul, they have the passion kind of thing.
And for us, it's like reputation, right? So if we can show our founders that we are their best investors on the cap table, where we're coming in, we're leaning in, we're helping them, and we genuinely want to do that for them, I'm hoping that they talk to their other founders that are friends that are raising money, and they refer us to them as well.
Now, the market's really tough, right? We went from 1.5 unicorns being minted every day, sky high valuations, 2020, 2021, to a lot of uncertainty in the markets, right? Interest rates are up, SaaS stocks have taken a beating, layoffs galore, valuations are down, and then this whole SVB chaos you, me, and probably everyone was dealing with a couple of weeks ago. What do you think went out there, and what can we as a startup community learn from this?
I think like keep your head down. Like I think like the way I answer that is, one, we're not building for tomorrow, we're building for the future. And so the macro economy, although it affects us, right? And affects in terms of like raising capital and so on. So one, it creates scrutiny for us, which I think is sometimes really good. It helps us really like sharpen our pencils, think about what we're building. Is what we're building actually a real need in the market? Like, don't fool yourself. Like, I think a lot of times founders are in their own bubble and they're like, oh, I'm building something that everybody will want. But honestly, no one gives 2 shits, right? They don't care. And you have to make sure they care about you. So I think this is also a forcing mechanism for us as founders to really think about like, what I'm building, are actually people going to care? Do people actually want it? And again, I think it makes us build must-haves, like real must-have platforms, not nice to have. So I think the nice to haves with this market have been squeezed out. So I think anyone that was building a nice to have is not around or will not be around. So I actually think it's been a good thing for the industry to really help all founders really think about what they're building. The bar is definitely higher. And I think net, it's a good thing in terms of what we're seeing, because I think there was a lot of fluff out there and a lot of things that probably shouldn't have gotten funding to begin with, right? Because there wasn't a real need for it, and they weren't growing the way other true unicorns were growing, and it's hard. I think this is a wake up call for everybody around the table.
Definitely. I feel like media has a huge part to play in creating this addiction or perpetuating this addiction to unicorn porn. But in reality, how many of those companies even hit 100 million annual recurring revenue? Not a lot, right? I have friends at 10, 20 million raised at 2, 3, 5 billion valuations. And now they're zombies because if they raise another round, it wipes out their whole cap table, right? Yeah. And so I think it creates a level of scrutiny that was needed in the market. Now, coming from this SVB debacle, I saw Gynger offering instant working capital and working capital in general for startups. What led to that decision, and how will this drive greater impact across the industry?
I think for us, it was a way of just figuring out how we can support founders that were impacted. We as Gynger were in a super unique position when SVB was going down, because we're literally financing companies' software and infrastructure purchases. So we're almost like this additional line of credit that you can use to pay for your software and infrastructure. But that being said, when we saw this, we're like, oh my gosh, like there's a lot of companies, we were getting inbounds like, hey, we need money to process payroll the next day. So we were about to wire millions of dollars to different companies to help them process their payroll. And it was really an act of just kind of like, how do we support the founders and ecosystem out there? Because what was happening was just like crazy. Like I'm a founder and I can't even imagine what other founders are seeing. Like they had millions of dollars at SVB, and immediately they only have 250,000 and that payroll to process. So that's where we spun it up pretty quickly. It took a couple of days to kind of figure out how we would underwrite it, how we would process it, how we would make that capital available for them outside of their infrastructure and software purchases. And we're continuing to support it. So we're out there and we're providing up to $1 million in working capital. There's no warrants, there's no personal guarantees, and we're trying to keep it as founder friendly as possible. We can underwrite in 10 minutes, which is super cool. And then we make it available. And hopefully through that, we're kind of building the trust that we want to have with other founders and other companies, and then kind of grow our business from there.
Fantastic. I mean, it takes a lot of effort to move this fast, but I think you've developed the muscle over 8 startups and helping all these early stage startups, right? Speed, I think like velocity is the currency of startups. But what's happening in venture capital right now? What do you think is driving decision making? Because the other hat, you're investing in a lot of companies at the early stages.
Yeah, I think what's changing now is just a higher bar, right? And it goes back to my earlier comment, like are companies building must-haves or nice-to-haves? And is there a real market for these companies where they can get to 100 million AR, right? And I think for us, we're being very slow now. We're doing maybe 1 deal a quarter. Maybe some quarters we won't even do a deal. We're being very sensitive to valuations. And we're being very real around like why we're investing, and we're taking our time. Like we just did a deal this quarter in Q1. Awesome founders, super strong. I took 2 weeks to do due diligence on the deal. In 2021, if you took 2 weeks, you'd lose that deal. You literally have to commit on the call. And I don't think that was healthy for anybody. One, founders should do due diligence on their investors. They should take time on who are my investors? Who do I want around the table? Who's going to be there to support me? Because it's not always going to be all great news for a founder, and there's going to be lots of down days, and you're going to need the support from your investors. And I think like for us, we want to make sure we're taking the time and doing what we need to do as a fiduciary duty to our LPs in doing the proper due diligence when we're investing. So, and that's us. I'm seeing for Series A, Series B, Series C investors, the bar is also super high now. Like I think for a Series A investment, it used to be if you hit $1 million AR, you'd have term sheets around the table. Now I think it's more 2 million AR you need to hit, and growing at 100% plus a year, right? So I think the bar has gotten higher. So I'm very curious to see how many companies from C to Series A survive, from Series A to Series B survive. You're going to see a lot of companies get squeezed out that were funded in 2020, 2021, maybe even 2022. So it's going to get very, very interesting. But for us, we're taking our time, being really slow, being really patient, because we also want to make sure we're the right investor for the founder, where we can really help them and support them.
Definitely. And I think the market will force a lot of venture-backed companies that were aggressive in raising money but don't have the growth metrics to end up becoming non-venture scale companies. I hate using the word lifestyle business. There's nothing wrong with it if you bootstrap it and you're taking a lot of money, but there's everything wrong with it if you have a lot of venture money and it's not growing at a certain speed, right? To meet those metrics. But what metrics are you and valuation expectations should founders have at, you said Series A, maybe it's 2 million, maybe growing over 100%. But at seed and Series A, let's dive a little bit. What are metrics that you like to see, and what are valuations that founders should make peace with?
One, the metrics for us is like they're so early. Some of them are pre-product, pre-revenue. So there aren't any metrics outside of like the founders and what we're looking at for the founders and all the things we spoke about in terms of market, the product that we want to build, and so on. Sometimes when we're getting to a seed, they've already have some revenue. So it's the plus is if they're already having 100K in AR, 500K in AR at a seed stage, and they actually have some customers that have design partners, they're actually proving that they have product market fit. So there's a little bit of a difference between the seed, pre-seed, and seed. Valuations, oh man, it's a hard question, but we've seen deals on pre-seed as low as 6.5, 6 million cap to as high as 15 million. And I think you're seeing the same thing on seed, maybe as low as 8 million to as high as, you're still seeing some deals at 20. You're seeing YC deals come out at 20 million caps, $25 million caps. I'm very sensitive to valuations. Like I think I like to kind of see deals anywhere as low as 6, as high as 15. That's kind of where we like to come in. I think that makes sense. We're targeting anywhere from 5 to 10% of companies that we invest in. And we're leaning heavier on 10% now. And again, for a company to raise at a $20 million valuation at a seed, for them to raise their Series A, they better hope they're passing 22 million in AR to justify a $20 million seed and justify a higher valuation. So you're setting the bar pretty high for yourself when you're raising at a valuation that high. But again, I think some founders are optimizing for dilution, which is kudos to them. They should be, but also be realistic around like how you're thinking about valuation. What are the milestones you need to hit next to get a $40 million post-money valuation, a $50 million post-money valuation on your A, which is super high, right?
Exactly. And a lot of companies, I think, they think the first fundraise and the press announcement is the end all be all, but the real work starts then, and you just end up making it harder. Board conversations are harder if you don't meet those milestones.
The way to think about it, the more money you raise in the higher valuation, the higher expectations, right? Higher, the threshold is higher in terms of what you need to do. And it's hard. It's hard. Budgets are getting tighter out there. Companies are slashing budgets in terms of buying new software. So you really need to build something really incredible for you to want to demand that and kind of be that must-have, right? So I think there's a lot of things that you need to be thinking about. I'm not trying to tell anybody don't start building a startup, but I'm trying to make you think about like, is what I'm building a must-have, and can I get the buyer to really see that, right?
Yeah, I think the way to look at it is, am I going to provide a 10x experience compared to what's there? Because a lot of the times they're just marginally better. Like every tool is existing, and it's just a copycat of the next. Like what is a 10x differentiator? Why would I cancel my subscription to one that I'm using and jump to you, right? And that's like for every tool that came after Zoom that says, hey, host your events on my tool, like why? There's no compelling reason. So that makes a lot of sense. Now you have an interesting purview, right? Doing Gynger, which is you're looking at all the companies and how much they're spending money on tools and tech. And on the other side, you're also investing in companies. What are the best teams investing in to drive growth? Like what are GTM teams you think doing today that's different, or what should they do that's different?
So it's back to go-to-market 101, right? I don't think there's a silver bullet. I think it's outbound emails, and there's a lot of tools out there that people are using, from Outreach to Apollo. You're also seeing a massive influx of tools that are combining AI into this. But I don't think there's a way to game the system on go-to-market. And I think a lot of founders that try to game it, they ended up a little empty-handed. I think as a founder, and I'll answer this question a little differently. As a founder, you want to be out there yourself, sending emails, getting on a call, doing a demo with potential customers, so you can learn how you're selling this and learn what product market fit is here. So one, I don't think there's a way to game it, but obviously there's tools that help you be more efficient with how you're doing it. HubSpot, obviously, in your CRM, and helping you kind of manage like the pipeline and so on. So that's kind of how I think about that. Like, I don't think there's a silver bullet in terms of how you do it. but you need to, I think it's really important to have all these foundational pieces in place in the early days. So when you do hire your first AE, you can give it to them and they can run with it. And I think that's what you need to make sure you have that in place so they're successful with their job, right? So I think the biggest mistake founders make is like, oh, I'm going to hire this really awesome AE or VP of sales that's going to get me all the customers I need. No. Like that person's not going to be able to do shit because like you're the founder, you're the one that needs to be selling this. You're the one that's going to be getting your first 100 customers. If you as a founder not getting your first 100 customers, something's up, right? And you're not going to get 100 customers, right? So I think like I would say the tech stack for go-to-market early days is the founder, right? That's how I kind of answer that question.
I'm glad you said it. It needs to be said enough. I graduated engineering and I took my first job in cold calling because a founder I spoke to said sales is the best skill you need to have. I was making 30,000 and my parents, like they're Indian, they had to hang their head in shame. My engineer son is making cold calls, but it served me the best because you use that communication to get customers, evangelize investors, media, recruiting, everywhere, that communication skill.
Yeah, sales for a founder is everything. Everything, like recruiting, you said it, fundraising, like communicating to your team, like everything. So like you can't be sitting back and waiting for inbounds. Like that's not happening.
It takes a long time.
No one's coming in on inbound. Two, you can't be waiting, be like, all right, I'm going to hire a really awesome VP of sales that grew the company from 0 to 20 million and they're going to come here and do everything for me. No. Like it needs to be you. And I think that's like the biggest mistake but I think maybe they underappreciate that their role as a founder coming in and building a B2B SaaS business or whatever it may be in terms of go-to-market.
That VP of sales doesn't exist. And every time you hire somebody, when you don't have product market fit, the incentives don't align, they get upset, they leave, and you're stuck there. I've seen this so many times. Now, what are your top 3 things you've learned as an 8-time entrepreneur that you could share with your portfolio companies or any entrepreneurs you meet?
I would say there's a few. I think you create your own luck, right? And what I mean by that is persistence and grit is super, super important. I think you need to, the more grit you have, the more persistence you have, it unlocks opportunities, and which is my way of defining creating your own luck, right? I think you can't just sit there. You just got to keep batting and hitting the ball, and just go at it. I think always remember why you started the company. I think that's number 1. 2, intuition. I think a lot of founders like don't trust their intuition too much. Your intuition is super smart. Like listen to yourself. It's usually right, especially in the early days, right? You as a founder, you know what you want to build. You know what you want to do. You're the only one that knows, right? So a lot of times people will be like, oh, are you crazy? You're going to build that? And you see something completely different than they do. And there's a reason why you're building it. So trust your intuition in a very massive way. And then second, I would say is listen to the customers too, right? So it's a combination of grit, persistence, intuition, but also listening to your customers. I think those were the things that I kind of like took with this. And when you combine all that, you'll kind of figure out your way forward. But don't give up. I think that's like the biggest thing. And I actually think a lot of companies fail because maybe they didn't raise enough money, so they didn't have enough time to do that grit and do that persistence and create their own luck to figure out product market fit. And last is no one's lucky, right? It's not. I think a lot of people think like, oh man, those people are so lucky. Look what happened. No, they were grinding for 10, 12 years to make it, and because they were grinding, they created their own luck. And I think that's kind of how I think about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's compound interest on consistency. Luck is when persistence meets hard work over a long period of time. Now, you've seen companies and taken a company to IPO, 0 to IPO, but you've seen the journey of Nutanix. What are the key things that need to be in place to make that journey from zero to IPO?
It's the team. I think it's all about the team. It's all about the vision. Like I think from the beginning, people always ask me, "Oh, where do you want your company to be? Like, what kind of company do you want to grow?" I'm like, "Look, I just want to build an awesome company that's having an incredible impact and an incredible culture. And if we can execute on all that, we'll control our destiny." Like, I'm not here to tell you I'm going to build a company that I want to sell in 3 years. I'm not building a company that I want to IPO, but I'm going to create a company that I can control the destiny. And if we can execute on all those things, it's super important. But I think having alignment with your co-founders around what you want to build in the early days and the vision, that's what it comes down to. And then obviously all the other things that are more scientific in terms of market size and iteration and the product and all the things that come with that. But I think the early team and the team that you can attract over time is the difference maker.
Definitely. People build companies, not the other way around. And the greatest companies are built on great alignment. Now, you mentioned mental health a couple of times as one of the things you help your companies with, the companies you invest in. And I've seen this, the biggest outcomes on the planet are founder-led, right? Like Shopify, Airbnb, and so on. So it's really important to be in top mental shape. But the market, things happen, right? Bad luck happens, bad things happen all the time. What are some things you do or you advise your companies to do to stay at the top of their mental game?
One, talk about the stuff that are on top of mind for you. Like, don't worry about like perception. Oh, if I talk about this, they may think I'm weak or they may think I'm not on top of it. Talk about that with someone on your cap table, with your co-founder. I think that's important. Take time off to get a breather, whether that's with your family or yourself or your friends, whatever it may be that helps you kind of just relax and the mind relax. And then 2, it's like, remember why you built this company and what your mission is, right? Because a lot of times it's interesting. Like, you might close a big deal today, and then for a month it's just quiet, and you're just kind of like bombed out. You're like, what the hell is going on here? I just closed that big deal, and for a month I haven't closed a deal. And that, I don't think that's like a true definition or kind of like what's happening with you as a founder or you as a company. That's just kind of normal life cycle. And I think sometimes a lot of founders think like they're the only ones going through this as a founder. Every single founder is going through very similar journeys in the early days and even mid days, and then at the end of it, right? And I just think like taking breaks are super important. I think like shutting off, take a breather, but also talking about it with someone that you can trust is super important.
Great advice there. Self-care is not selfish. Take some breaks, right? Recharge. You need that time. As you look back, what was your toughest or lowest point of your journey, and how did you navigate it?
Wow. I think a tough part for me was we were trying to raise our Series A for Braze. I had 2 weeks left of payroll, and we didn't have one fund that was willing to give us a term sheet. And the one that I thought was coming through called me to say that they're passing, and I'm like, holy shit, I don't know what we're gonna do. But that was, I convinced him to say like, hey, can I come see you? And I flew out to SF. And it was interesting because he didn't pass because he didn't like the business. He passed because he thought I wanted a higher valuation. And we spoke about that, and we eventually agreed on a valuation and got the term sheet. That was a very hard moment because you're like looking in the room. We were about 20, 30 people at that point, and we needed to process payroll in 2 weeks, and we only had 2 weeks of pay left, like 2 weeks of burn left, not pay. And that was crazy. That was like it was funny at the IPO. I told the investor, I thought I told him, but he never knew that we only had 2 weeks left at that time when he signed the term sheet. So it was a pretty wild journey. I think that was kind of one moment that I kind of reflect on a lot.
And I think that's where also the communication or the sales skill probably saves the day, because you flew out to SF. A lot of people would just take that as rejection and move on. And you asked the extra questions to uncover that he thought you wanted a higher valuation.
I remember the call specifically. He called me, and it was Tom Peterson with Rally Ventures. And he was like, look, love the team, love what you're building, but I think we're just going to pass. I'm like, Tom, I'm like, whoa. Where are you? Like, first time, where are you? He's like, oh, I'm in SF in our office. I'm like, can I come see you tomorrow? I'm in New York. I'll get on a plane right now. I'll come see you. Because I really want to figure out how to do this. Assuming that you want to do the deal and you tell me what's holding you back. And on that call, he's like, look, I think it's valuation. If you're willing to talk about that, come see me. I'm like, absolutely. So I went straight to the airport with my backpack, and I got on the plane and went and met him, and we figured it out.
That is grit, man. That is grit. It's giving me chills. My hair on my hand is freaking standing. I've seen that too, right? Like where, you can't make payroll and you don't know where it's going to come. And then the deal happens, you get wired a check, man. That is more exciting than anything else. That's more exciting than a bungee jump. As we close this off, this has been a very, very enlightening conversation for me. Our viewers are going to love it. What is the one piece of unconventional advice founders typically ignore but shouldn't?
They ignore? It's a tough question. One, I think, goes back to maybe what we were talking about, your intuition. Trust your intuition. I think a lot of founders second guess their intuition, and they're always looking for validation from someone else because they don't trust themselves. I think trust yourself. I think that's maybe a lot of investors may not say that. I think also the last thing I would say, honestly, I think office. I think a lot of people are like, oh, we'll just be remote, and investors are like, yeah, that's cool. No. You need people. You need to be in the office. You need to see your team. You need to you're building relationships. You're literally married to your team. So I think it's hard to build a new business if you're not in the office. And I would tell you, to all founders, you close your seed, you close your Series A, whatever round you close, go get an office, get your team in the office, make sure you're all there, celebrate your wins together, and learn from your losses together. The amount of things that you talk about in the office, you get to know each other, you get to understand how their weekend was, you could see on someone's face if they're having a good day or not. You build that relationship. I'm a big office guy, and I think maybe that's the answer. That's the unconventional thing I would give feedback on, is get an office with your team.
That is unconventional, but I think in the early days, it's important, right? Your team is your first community. And there's actually science there. Anytime you incorporate more than two senses, you start building stronger bonds. We're sight and sound. But if we were doing this podcast in person, we'd probably grab dinner or drinks after, would get to know each other better. And that is just the reality of it. You can't build stronger communities and relationships just online. You need to be there in person.
There's an energy in the office when you walk in and you see people there, and you're talking, or how was your night last night? What are you doing later? Or you hear them on a call and you're like, oh, how did that call go? And there's just so much happening that's awesome. And there's an energy that Zoom calls are just transactional. Oh, okay, we'll talk at 1:00, and then at 1:55 you're off, and then you're gone, right? So I there's something between transactional and real, right? I think real, and honestly, it could be a huge competitive edge in this market, because a lot of people are remote, and you're together, you can kick ass together, right?
It's riding that Peloton bike. I used to not exercise. Like I work out and everything, but never do cardio. But once I started hopping on the Peloton bike, just the energy of the people around and the instructor there just drove me. Energy is a big thing. And imagine doing that in person, and the compound interest in energy every day in, day out helps you build really big things. This has been an awesome conversation. Thank you so much, Mark. Where do we follow you on your wisdom? Where are you active?
Yes, so I'm on Twitter, Mark Gher, MarkGher, and I'm on LinkedIn. I'm not heavy on any other social media, but those are the two that I'm on.
Fantastic, Mark. Wishing you great success, a bunch more IPOs, a bunch more unicorns. Thanks so much for joining us.
I need some traction.